Hi everyone, my name is Brittany J. Jones. In this video, I will be demonstrating how to do understitching. You will see the word understitching in your sewing directions if you are attaching a facing, a lining, and even bias tape. Sometimes you will see where it says to do understitching. The purpose of understitching is to keep the facing and the lining turned toward the inside and in place so that it's not rolling out, and it will also keep the edge really nice, clean, and flat. And that is what we want in our garments. Know that with understitching, you're only going to be able to go as far as you can possibly go on your sewing machine with your fabric. So you won't be able to start your understitching where you started your stitch with attaching the facing or the lining. It's going to be about 2 to 3 inches, a little bit shorter, and that's perfectly fine. The purpose of understitching when you're stitching it is to just go as far as you possibly can. Let's get started with the video. To demonstrate understitching, I'm going to be using this facing here that I have attached to a bodice. Now, depending on the garment that you're working on, you may need to do understitching on a facing as well, or maybe you need to do understitching on a lining, or maybe even some bias tape. But just know that the same stitch is for all understitching. After you have sewn your facing and you're getting ready to do your understitch, you first want to make sure that you trim down your seam, clip into any curves that you may possibly have, and you also want to give it a good press. You want to make sure that you are pressing your seam allowance toward your facing or your lining. It's really important to press at this step because we want to make sure that we have this nice and flat. It will make stitching a lot easier. Unless it's otherwise noted in your sewing instructions, you will be doing a stitch that's 1/8 of an inch away from this seam. When doing understitching, you will come to an area where it's just hard to get to. Like, there's no way we're going to get in here to do understitching, and that's okay. You want to understitch as far as you can go. For the most part, you may be able to get in within 3 inches, but again, just go as far as you can go with your understitch. Let's go ahead and start stitching now. When doing an understitch, I like to start on one of the sides where it's just really hard to get to. So I would start again about 3 inches away, or as close as I can get to it. That's where I'll begin. Before we start sewing, you want to make sure that you still have your seam flat and that your seam allowance is facing towards your facing or your lining. Be sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end of your stitch. Once you're all set and ready to go, I like to drop my needle into position because I want to make sure to find a guide on my presser foot that will help me stay straight while I'm sewing. I'm going to be using this inside groove on my presser foot right here as the guide. So I'm just going to keep my eye here, not watching my needle. I'm going to watch right here to make sure that I have a straight stitch while I'm doing my understitching. Always stop to double check to make sure that that seam allowance is still facing toward the facing and that none of your fabric has slid up under your presser foot. Okay, I have my understitching on my facing, and here's a close look at my stitch. I was able to keep my eye on that guide to get a really nice clean stitch, and as you can see, I am really close to our seam. Once you have your understitching applied, the next step is to go ahead and flip it to the inside of your garment like so. And then you want to give it one more press. After you have given your understitch a final press, now you can go ahead and refer back to your sewing directions to continue constructing your garment.